Let me read to you a passage from the 12th chapter of St. Mark's Gospel, verses 38 to 44. It's the Gospel for the 32nd Sunday of Ordinary Time, Year B. St. Mark writes, "As he taught, Jesus said, 'Watch out for the teachers of the law. They like to walk around in flowing robes and be greeted in the marketplaces and have the most important seats in the synagogues and the places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses and for a show make lengthy prayers. Such men will be punished most severely.'" Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins, worth only a fraction of a penny. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, "I tell you the truth, this poor widow has put in more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on." That's from Mark chapter 12, verses 38 to 44. What does it suggest to us? Well, it suggests loving the poor. You know, Sir David Attenborough, the famous producer of natural history documentaries, once declared himself to be an agnostic. He did not know if there is a God. And when asked why his profound familiarity with the wonderful world of nature does not lead him to the author of nature, he pointed to the cruelty he saw everywhere in nature. The helpless are attacked and devoured. There is ruthless cruelty by the strong over the weak. Nature does not reflect mercy to the needy, which is what we expect of God. That was his thinking. Now, setting aside the question of how that pattern is to be interpreted, we would surely have to allow that a similar impression could be gained from the human scene. While there have been wonderful exceptions, is not neglect and oppression of the needy and the poor an ingrained feature of human history? Prescinding from the dictates of Judeo-Christian revelation, consider just a few examples. India. India is arguably the most religious nation in the world. The religious imagination pervades that vast and teeming people, illustrating the claim that man is above all a religious being by nature. He yearns for the transcendent, the ultimate, and wishes to be one with it. But look at India's abominable caste system and the abiding treatment of its untouchables. The elimination of this despicable attitude to the poorest has proved to be an enormous challenge. And all through history, the afflicted have been neglected. For long centuries, slavery, accompanied by great cruelty to slaves, has marred civilization, and it has been tolerated by religious societies, including even Christian societies. In the modern era, millions of the most helpless are routinely snuffed out of their struggle for life by abortion, and this cruelty is sanctioned by legislation. And the list could go on and on. The point I'm making here is that while man may be instinctively religious, he can be instinctively cruel and neglectful of the poor. And if man does not check himself by reference to his higher moral instincts, he will not love the poor, but rather will be deeply irritated by them. Further, he will even tend to exploit the poor. Man's religious life tends to proceed on a sphere distinct from concern for the poor. By nature, man longs for the God who is beyond, while tending to neglect the poor man who is right here. In revealed religion, this absolutely will not do. When Cain killed his brother Abel, he incurred the wrath of God. When Moses received the 10 Commandments on Sinai, it was discovered that the first 3 governed our relations with God, while 7 our relations with man. The prophets inveighed against a religion of splendid ritual and sacrifices in the midst of a blithe oppression of the poor. "I hate such sacrifices," Yahweh God said. To be religious, one had also to be deeply concerned for the poor. Jesus Christ, the image of the unseen God, showed that God identifies with the poor. In his ministry, our Lord loved the poor, understanding by this term, of course, the person in genuine need. He was profoundly merciful. He saw the widow of Nain, and feeling profoundly sorry for her, raised her son to life. He responded to need everywhere, pointing withal to the greatest misery of all, the misery of sin. It was this pitiable condition of sin which he had come to do away with. Christ showed the unlimited love of God for the one who is poor. In our gospel today that I read earlier, from Mark chapter 12, verses 38 to 44, our Lord condemns the experts of the law for, among other things, their lack of concern for the poor. They devour widows' houses, and for show make lengthy prayers. Such men will be punished most severely, he says. He notices with a special love the poor and suffering individual. He stopped in the crowd when the poor woman touched his cloak for a healing. He wanted to have contact with her. And in our gospel today that I read earlier, he sees the poor widow putting into the treasury all she had to live on. He holds her up for imitation. Christ loved the poor, and he requires of his disciples that they love the poor. At the last judgment, as we read in Matthew chapter 25, verse 40, he will say to every man and woman that whatever we have done to the least has been done to him. Love for the poor must distinguish the Christian life, and the saints have been shining examples of this Christian spirit. The very phrase, being very Christian, has come to mean being very concerned for the needy. Love for the poor is manifested on a variety of fronts, in the struggle against material poverty and also against the many forms of cultural, moral and religious poverty. The spiritual and corporal works of mercy and the numerous charitable institutions of the centuries all show the preferential love for the poor which characterizes the spirit of Christ and his disciples. Let us then pray that we shall love the poor and show God's mercy towards them.